Cisco announced a minor update to CCNA for 2024, but the books, we get a new edition and a fairly major update. Want to know why? Watch this video. In this video, I'm going to give you some insights into how I think about revising for a new edition of the official CCNA Cert Guides. I haven't talked about this a lot in the past, but in this case, the new update for version 1.1 of the CCNA blueprint is pretty minor. But it turns out we have several other reasons for needing to do a new edition that adds up to a fairly large update. So I want to walk you through that. If you stay till the end, though, I'm going to give you a little insight into some big changes outside the covers of the books. So stay till the end for that. Let's jump into it. Let's review a bit about the version 1.1 blueprint and talk about some context that matters to the decision for us to create new editions of the books. Looking backward, Cisco announced the version 1.0 blueprint in June of 2019. The exam then came out in February of 2020, so about an 8-month lag between those. That was a huge update date, that February 2020 date. Lots of exams and certifications changed at that time. Then now we've got April of 2024 for the blueprint announcement, with August of 2024 for the new CCNA exam release, as planned at least. So that's important, and it's about 4.5 years, and that's important to the decision making as well. All right, so keep that in mind. And then you need to be aware of a silent change to the version 1.0 blueprint that Cisco made, because for the most part, the changes were just wording changes. So not quite halfway, but a little past halfway in between those events. Cisco updated the version 1.0 blueprint. It remained the version 1.0 blueprint. They have every right to do that. They even tell us we can change this at any time. They weren't doing it out of maliciousness or anything like that. They just changed the wording. And that happened around November of 2022. Now, truly, most of the wording changes really didn't affect the meeting, but some did, at least in my opinion. So, as book author, I wrote some new material about the updated exam topics that I think expanded the meaning. Anybody that's had my books could have downloaded those PDFs. The books even tell you, make sure to go look for updated versions of these PDFs and download them and read them. And people have been doing that over the last year or two to see the material on these updated exam topics. All right, so that's one reason why we might update the exam topics. Now, when you go read Cisco's CERT roadmap page to learn about the changes, they're going to focus on the changes between the, quote, current version 1.0 blueprint, the one that you can get on their website now, which is what was updated in late 2022. You can't get the literal PDF of the original 1.0 blueprint from their website. It went away there in late 2022. All right, so over on the right, that shows you the difference there, but I need to be concerned about everything that's changed since the last edition. So it's really two parts. Look at the left side of this graphic. We update the books, we update them for the new 1.1 blueprint, as well as that version 1.0 interim silent update that I just mentioned. So those are two of the main reasons right there. The other two are rescoping and modernizing the books. So I'm going to give you a few more words about the 1.0 interim update, rescoping, and modernizing to tell you a little more about our thinking about the exams. The version 1.1 blueprint changes, I've got another whole video about that, so hopefully you've already seen that. If not, you can go check that out too. So beyond the obvious changes in the new version 1.1 blueprint, we've got this interim blueprint release. It wasn't as many changes as the new version 1.1 blueprint changes, but there are some. So focusing on the way things were back in June 2019 with the original release and the updated version of the 1.0 blueprint back in late 2020, focusing on that, here are the changes that were made that, in my opinion, changed meaning. So there's the original wording from the June 2019 blueprint that says, explain virtualization fundamentals, virtual machines, in parentheses, and the parenthetical changed to server virtualization, containers, and VRFs. And certainly containers and VRFs are not virtual machines or a subset thereof, so that expanded the meaning. We added material about those things, put them in a PDF you could download. So pretty straightforward, but a small expansion of the exam topic. This one is mostly rewording, but I want to clarify what it meant. Connectivity was at best ambiguous. That's all the exam topic said. It got changed to inter-VLAN connectivity. My book's already covered that. That has to do with layer 3 switching. Had a whole chapter on layer 3 switching, still do. I've updated that a bit for the new edition, but I think from an exam topic perspective, I could argue that might have been a small expansion since the original didn't really say it was about inter-VLAN or layer 3 switching. The third one, this one definitely expands the meaning. It says describe the purpose of first hop redundancy protocol versus the describe the purpose, functions, and concepts of that same topic. So functions and concept, much broader and much more detailed than just the purpose of. I like to think of it like automobile. I own a car for the purpose of is much different than the way a car works is, right? So that's the kind of wording change here. So you need to know how these first hop redundancy protocols work. At least that's my interpretation of the meaning of that change. It expanded that exam topic. Then finally, this next one probably changed and shrunk the scope just a tad because it added the clarifier IPsec into this exam topic about VPNs. So there you go. So wasn't a huge deal. By volume, a couple of topics there. You could read those, but and you could download PDFs if you had my books. And if you want to look at those, oh yeah, there was one more I forgot to mention here. Instead of just configure wireless LANs, it was configure and verify them, which just adds more emphasis to your need to understand the graphical interface and the screens you see when configuring wireless LANs from the wireless LAN controller. All right, so reiterate it one more time. It's a 2-volume set for the books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Together, they cover all the exam topics for CCNA. So when we built this extra content that's available right now, we built a Appendix B update for Volume 1 for topics that one day would land in Volume 1 and a different one for Volume 2, 2 different PDFs. You can download them and read them now. For the new editions, that content then gets integrated into the new books in the appropriate place rather than be a tack on to the end of the books. Now, we do this every edition, so I just kind of think of it as normal, but just to talk through it, there's this idea of rescoping the exam topics. So what do I mean by scoping in the first place? Well, here are a few exam topics from the blueprint. And if we look at things, there's a domain. That's the major organization heading inside the blueprint document. There are 6 domains for CCNA, and the second one is network access. And then the major items in there are called tasks. Those are the ones with verbs in the wording. And then there are subtasks. Those are the ones that don't have verbs, and the verb that's applied to those is assumed to be the verb of the task they sit under. So like 2.1 A, B, and C would be assumed to have the verb configure and verify in this case. All right. Now, we take a 4 to 5 page blueprint document and come up with 1,200 pages of content. So clearly we have to interpret, what that small blueprint document says and expand it into, well, what is Cisco really going to potentially ask you on the CCNA exam? And then what do we need to help you learn to be ready for that, right? So that comes from just experience and research and information and secret sauce, honestly. And so every time there's a new edition, it's a great opportunity to reconsider every last exam topic and ask the question, am I serving you well on a given exam topic? Does the book cover too much? Does it cover too little? Is it just right? Is it covering the right mix of topics? So it's been almost 5 years since we saw a new blueprint from Cisco where we had an opportunity to do a new edition. And that's a pretty good long time in the publishing world. So that's a good motivation for us to do new editions. So let me tell you what we did just for rescoping, just to give you a little bit of insight. Now I'm going to tell you about the ones that are really obvious because it's whole new chapters. In 2020, in the 2020 new exam announced in 2019, Cisco shrunk the exam quite a bit. And I removed a topic about subnet design. It was an entire chapter that I had in prior editions. I just pulled it out. It was also available to you online if you wanted, by the way, but it wasn't part of the required reading in the printed book. And I've added it back. So I looked at the scope of the IP addressing topics, and I've decided, hey, I think you need to know that. All right, so me just rethinking the scope. There's another whole chapter here. It's really more of a half chapter. I reswizzled some of the content that gives us more information about IPv6 on hosts. Like what are the host commands that you use to find IPv6 addresses and routes and neighbor tables and the like. So there's a little bit more of that there, and those topics are in volume 1. And then there's a whole new chapter that I call Applied Access Control Lists. And it's just a complete treatment of how do you match different overhead protocols with IP access control lists, things that I didn't separate out in the old chapters, but it seemed appropriate, all things considered, that we needed some serious treatment there. Now, most of the time, rescoping ends up identifying some small topics. It's like, when I thought about OSPF, there were 15 things I considered, and this previous edition I included 11 and didn't include 4, and maybe there's 1 or 2 that I had left out before that I might ought to have in there now, that kind of thing. So just to make the point, there's probably a dozen 1 or 2 page editions spread out through both books that are the result of me thinking like this, all right? But that happens every edition. I'm just trying to balance the whole idea of taking a relatively sparse general set of exam topics and deciding what we need to cover for you inside the books. So the last motivation for coming out with new editions this time around has to do with modernizing the books. We just can't let the books go on forever and ever without coming out with new editions sometimes. So let me give you a little bit of perspective on that, because I think this is one of the reasons it's the least expected from the general populace. So look back at the 9 CCNA revisions. We've got years at the top of this timeline, and then we see the exam numbers below. So from its inception in 1998 through the 2016 release, Cisco changed the CCNA exam number when they published a new blueprint. That was their convention. So we see all those exam numbers. You might remember that if you were early to the game, right? And then with the 2020 blueprint, they said, hey, we're going to number this exam 200-301, and we're going to start putting version numbers on the exams and leave the exam number the same and change the blueprint version number. So in 2020, it was version 1.0. Here in 2024, it's version 1.1. If it's a major update, that first number will change. If it's a minor update, it's the second number that would change. For instance, if we had 5 more minor updates in a row, it'd be version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on. All right, so those are the 9 CCNA revisions. Well, just think about what networking technology was probably like back in 1998, right? There are topics in the current books, in fact, the new ones coming out in 2024, that were in the 1998 edition. Yeah, but it would be silly to think that you could just leave it sitting there and not think about it again and reconsider updating it to modernize it. Just to give you a few perspectives on that. Oh, by the way, I did want to mention the revisions to blueprints happened a little quicker earlier in the life of CCNA, but in the recent past, last couple of decades, it's about 4 years in between new CCNA blueprints. So think about it from the long term. If you have chapters and you pretty much don't touch them from one edition to the next, you can get to 8 and 12 years out before you might take a look at a chapter to update it. Well, a lot of technology changes in that kind of time frame, right? So we need to modernize. So what am I talking about there? Well, hardware changes. So you might make a claim about how hardware works, and that's just not how the modern day hardware you would buy today works. Like back in 1998, production switches, you might have 24 10 megabit ports into 100 meg ports. And today you buy a new switch, gigabits, the slowest thing you've got on it, right? So you've just gone through speed changes. Back in the early days, there was a lot more emphasis on WAN in CCNA. A lot of that used serial interfaces. It used frame relay data link protocol. All that has come and gone to where it's almost all Ethernet WAN interfaces. Tons of software updates. It could be something as simple as, hey, that bold command change, show Mac dash address table changed to show Mac space address table. Well, we want to update the book to use the more current command. And then for 2 editions, people would say, no, you mistyped it, because some people knew the old command only and some people knew the new command only, right? So you just got this kind of thing with updates over time. But more importantly, sometimes Cisco changes how iOS behaves. And it's not that they want to mess with us, they just update things because customers need different things to happen. And sometimes it's a minor enough thing to them to where it doesn't need fanfare or anything, but it's like, whoops. Like, for instance, forever, it used to be you could make the claim 1 IP access control list per interface per direction. That's kind of a mantra you might hear people say. Well, guess what? They changed that rule. You could actually have 2 now with something called a common ACL. So when I work through the books and I'm thinking about a new edition, I'll look at chapters and say, hey, I didn't look at those hard previous editions. So with this edition, they'll be 8 years old pretty much. I need to go through and recreate all those examples in real devices, regather output, make sure it works the same, research the topics, see what things have changed. So I've done probably more modernizing for these editions than I have in some of the prior ones, right? So I wanted to get those spiffed up as well because I had a little extra time on my hands to do that kind of thing. So I took advantage of it. So that's that last motivator. To sum up then, we updated the books for the new blueprint, for the material we'd already written and put in PDFs for that interim silent update. We rescoped some of the exam topics and we've modernized some of the topics. All right. So we think the books are much improved and a little bit expanded to meet the current needs of the exam. Up front in this video, I told you I'll tell you a little bit more about things that change outside the book covers. So what am I talking about? The practice tests that come with the book. So those are electronic. You get access to those online. You buy the books, you follow the instructions, and you get access to those. So it's more questions, it's revised questions, improvements there. I think you'll like what you get both in the retail package and with the premium edition ebooks, and I'll give you all that detail in some videos next week if you're watching this the day I release the video, this video at least. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a couple more videos for you, one especially to help give you some guidance for what should you do. If you're watching this in real time and you're seeing this just after the announcement, should you go for the old exam or wait and try to pass the new? That's always the classic question, so I'll have a video on that here in the coming days. Hey, thanks for hanging out, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for staying till the very end. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. It's almost brand new. I'll be rolling out more CCNA content and review videos starting on May 1st. Thanks for hanging around. I'll talk to you soon.